Okay, so here's the problem. You set up a print and you walk away thinking everything is sweet. But minutes or hours later, you get summoned back by the beeping of their out of filament alert. So you go and check your printer, but there's plenty of filament on the reel, and you go through the replace filament process and continue to print, walk away, only to be beeped at again in a few more minutes or hours. What is the problem? I think the issue can often be the filament sensor lever. The filament sensor lever is a small arm that is pushed by the filament to trigger the sensor. The filament actually slides past a steel ball that pushes the arm, like you can see here. You can test your filament sensor by going to Settings, Support, and Sensor Info. When the sensor is triggered, that is when the filament is in, it should show a 1. When there's no filament, it should show a 0. Now, when the filament moves around during printing, it can cause the lever to move a bit more than it needs to. This causes the sensor to register 0 momentarily and trigger the out of filament routine. That then stops the print and starts beeping annoyingly until you come along and sort it out by removing the filament and replacing it again. Now, I found that the cause of this can be because parts of the ball cage and the sensor cover have worn, giving more clearance than is needed. But it's also a known issue that the Prusa design sensor lever is a bit fickle and in some cases a bit too short. So I'm going to show you how I tackle this problem by modifying the lever so it's bigger than normal and then fine-tuning it by sanding and trimming until it was just right. So this is the original lever design and this is the larger version. You can see here in the CAD where I've increased the size of the ball contact surface and the sensor contact surface. Now this is the original part that was downloaded off the Prusa website. It's the FS lever, and this is the part that I've modified, and you can see that the modified version has got a longer edge over here and over here compared to this one here. So I've made it quite long so that it's probably too long, but it's going to allow me to sand it back gently, bits at a time, until I can get the perfect fit. Now I'm going to replace the old one with the new one. First up is to go to the Prusa website to find out how to disassemble the hot end so you can access the sensor. Make sure you're checking the correct version for your printer. Got to get this thing out, and you've got to watch out that the ball doesn't fly away, because it'll want to. So inside there is the little ball, which will come out. We don't want to lose that. I'll keep that in my little box down there. And then this sensor bit will come out. Right. And it's got that magnet in, which we need to remove. So we could probably grab a pair of pliers. Oops. Yank it out. There you go. Now I'm going to make sure I've got it oriented the same way, because it needs to repel the other magnet on the other side rather than attract it. If it does attract, it's very easy to swap it around. You can see that it's interfering there with the sensor, so I've got to cut off a tiny little bit. Okay, so I've trimmed it back a tiny bit, but it's still interfering, but I don't want to trim it anymore. So what I'm going to do is actually undo the actual sensor and then put that into position and then return the sensor back. I can't do that with one hand, so I'm going to have to place that a bit of a distance and then just undo that, loosen that a bit. Right, and that fits in, and I'm just going to tighten it back up. Now that does actually move quite well. Let's put its screw back in. And the important thing now is to make sure that in its open position, it's not blocking the sensor or interfering with it, to make sure that it isn't thinking that there is filament. So, if we have a look now, the sensor is on 0. Sensor is on 0, and if I can't put filament in because there is none. And if I move the lever with my finger like that, it should be detecting 1. Unfortunately, it's not. Well, that didn't work, did it? Could it be that the sensor is still blocking? I'll have to cut out a little bit more and see. Alright, so I've trimmed it a bit and sanded it back a bit and played around with it a bit. Now it seems to be sitting quite nicely. And as you can see, when it's in position, we've got a 1. And when I let go, we've got a 0. So if I do that, I can show you, you can do a bit of a back and forth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Getting a nice good reading there. So hopefully that should all work with the ball in as well. So I'm going to reinstall that. Move that lever back so that it goes in. Now let's try that again. So this time I can use the filament to go in, pushes the ball and pushes the lever. But unfortunately, it's not changing. So what that means is that the ball is actually pushing the lever too far back. So what I've done with this design is I've made the front of that lever quite long, so that I can then adjust it to suit. Because what actually happens is when the filament runs down this hole here, you can see on mine it's actually worn out the hole quite a bit. So that means that the ball changes position inside this little housing there. So the beauty of this design is that I can adjust the design just by sanding back 0.2 of a millimeter or 0.3 of a millimeter, and that would get it in the right position. So I'm going to disassemble that and try that again. So now here's that part, and this is the bit that I've made extra long, which is probably a bit too much. So what I'm going to do is just sand back and see how that goes. Just checking that the sensor is working as I turn it on and off. 1. It's on and off, it's going. Put the little ball part back in. No, too much. Still too much. Still showing me a 1 there, where I should be getting a 0. So I'm going to have to adjust that one more time. See how we go. What I've done for this time is I've actually made a mark on the lever itself. You can just see it there with a pencil right there. And that's the mark where the lever is being pushed by the ball. It's roughly about there is where the mark is where it's being pushed by the ball. So it actually needs to move quite a bit to trigger that 0. So it triggers the 0 around here, but the ball is holding it up there. So that's how sensitive it is. So there's another about a 0.5 millimeter that I've got to take off. But this time I'm going to take it off from the back side, from the inside of the lever there. So I just use a scalpel just to take off about 0.5 millimeter, or maybe a little bit more than 0.5 millimeter from that edge. And I'm going to stick it in now and see how it works. You can see now where that lever is sitting, it actually clears the sensor completely. So hopefully when the ball goes in, it'll push it just enough to block and create that trigger. Alright, moment of truth. See if it works. Beauty. Right, let's get close up there. So I go in, the ball pushes the lever, locks the sensor. And if we look down here, we've got that sensor coming on and off the way it should be. First got to test it, make sure it all works and run out of filament and see what it does. But otherwise it's looking good. Yeah, so it's detected the filament, it's installed it. I'm just going to run a quick print and we'll see if it detects when it runs out of the tiny bit of filament. Literally a tiny bit of filament that I've given it. And when it passes that ball, it should hopefully tell me that it's run out. There you go. Press to unload the filament. Excellent. All right, I'm going to do that. Now, if the auto load is working, then that should just take it up straight away. Insert the filament. And away it goes. Now, the problem that was happening before was that when that would wobble, it would detect no filament. But now, it seems to be pretty good. Still printing, still printing. I can go pretty wild. Yeah, that works. So that's now working very nicely. The files are available on printables.com. You'll find the link down below. Do all those subscribe and follow and like and that sort of thing to get more of these sort of videos. Cheers.